Everyone, welcome back to Dad's Spending Politics. It's been a while since our last episode because there's been stuff going on, The news has continued, unfortunately, so we've missed out on a few weeks worth of content. We're going to try and put a lot of it into this week's episode. But we've also decided to start doing fortnightly episodes instead of every week because we think that we can put more detail and more clarification into those episodes so they're more succinct and you guys can get more out of them. But yeah, welcome back. We've got a lot of engagement on YouTube as of recently. Lots of people commenting many things, so we love that engagement. Keep it up. If you disagree with our opinions, we love that. If you agree with our opinions, that's fine. We're accepting what everyone has to say, although we don't really want any hate on our platform, so I will say this now. You can say that you disagree with things, that's fine, but there's no need to use awful terms. You can just say I completely disagree. And that's that. No need for the hate because we are happy to be here disagreeing with each other, aren't we?
Disagreeing agreeably. That's the
Yes,
concept
but
of the
no, but
podcast.
stop using that concept because that's another podcast concept. And every time you say that, I get worried about copyright. So it's literally like by word, that is another podcast's. So we're gonna stop with that.
Anyway, in feedback from
Redirect.
people, we're going to a two-weekly format. If you're super disappointed about that, let us know and we may reconsider. But we want to put more emphasis, as Freddie said, into the two-weekly format. So
Definitely.
today, Freddie, we're going to touch on Gaza. Lots of developments in the last week or so. The latest on Ukraine, the latest on the King's protests in the US, a little update on Prince Andrew, and then we'll finish with interesting robbery at the Louvre.
Yeah, a little bit of a fun update in a world where it never seems to stop being
And
depressing. So we
and
have
I
to talk
just
about some
thought,
fun stuff every now and again.
yes, we need a bit of fun in this, and I just thought we should do a little bit of a preview as well of Albo's visit to Washington, which is coming up this week, tomorrow, actually.
Yes, this is true. This is true. Well, I mean, I'm sure we'll be able to cover that properly next week, but we can always do a little summary if you have that in you. But yeah, let's start with everything happening in Gaza. I don't know if you want to start off or I can.
Yes, I can start off. So it's been a big week or so. The remaining living hostages have been released. The Israeli forces have pulled back to, I think it's designated as a yellow line, partial withdrawal from Gaza. This was the meeting brokered by the Trump administration together with key players in the Middle East, Jared Kushner and
Jared Kushner, son-in-law of Trump, is a key
son-in-law of
player in the
Trump.
Middle East.
Yes, and involved with Witkoff, and really got to, I suppose, the first positive thing with Gaza in a long time that the hostages have been released, and many of those Palestinian hostages have been, thousands of them, released by the Israelis back into Palestine. The
Can
big
I just
question,
clarify? Interesting, huh? That thousands and thousands of Palestinian hostages and how many Israeli hostages were taken by Hamas? There was like 100.
yes, there's a big difference.
I'm just clarifying the number difference.
Yep, and so the big question will it be a lasting peace because the rest of the peace agreement is a little bit fuzzy. There was a 20-point plan. And, there's all sorts of talk of Tony Blair being in charge of some sort of administration of the Palestinian state going forward. So it'll be interesting, but at least some positive news. And it was wonderful to see the joy on the faces of both the Palestinians getting their prisoners back and the Israelis getting those people who have been in prison for more than 2 years, right? So at least a positive week somewhat in regard to Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, yeah, you can say that. There's definitely a degree of hope that we've been seeing, but unfortunately, there have been over 90 deaths since the ceasefire started, which have been conducted by Israel. Israel has killed over 90 Palestinians in Gaza since the ceasefire was announced. So they've actually violated the ceasefire agreement 80 plus times. They have said that this is in response to Hamas violating the ceasefire and killing 2 Israeli soldiers. As yet, we have barely any evidence for any of this, but we know that at least even I think Israel has claimed that over 30 people have been killed in Gaza by the IDF. and the Palestinian numbers are saying over 90 plus. So I look, yes, sure, it's good. Of course, I'm happy because we want less people to be dying. I just think, unfortunately, the nature of the situation is this isn't going to last for long. It's probably going to be similar to every other ceasefire that's happened. We've seen the Israeli plans for Gaza. We've seen their plans to redevelop the entire space. We've seen their ethnic cleansing plans. They have very openly said that they are planning to move the entire population out of the region, and this is why they brought their ground forces into the region in the first place. It is very clear that that's what they want to do. They don't want Palestinians living on their land anymore. So regardless of whether there's a ceasefire right now or not, the end goal is not to get rid of Hamas. The end goal seems to be to relocate the Palestinians to a different land because they won't feel secure until this happens. So the ceasefire then, if you think along that line of logic, if you think their end goal is to not have Palestinians living on what they consider their territory, this cannot be the end because they have to succeed in their goal, and that unfortunately requires killing and harming a lot more Palestinian
But
individuals.
Freddie, that was not part of the peace agreement with the all Qatars and the Saudis and everyone else, right? It's part of the 20-point
Qataris.
plan that, there will be a Palestinian state, right? And that's part of the scenario here. The fact is, it'll be interesting what Netanyahu's position is going forward, right? Because it was really the US that forced him into complying with this and got this agreement. And so, interestingly, Netanyahu could have achieved this level of ceasefire months ago, and so could have Trump actually with a scenario. At least it's been achieved now. And you've got to be somewhat hopeful when you've got all these Arab countries involved in this wanting to do the right thing, that there is a path to some sort of peaceful future. And hopefully without Hamas, because I also saw reports of Hamas summary executions of people in Gaza, etc., going forward, right?
We know that Hamas is a terrorist group. I don't know why you're bringing this up like this is a new piece of information that they're killing people.
Well, in a
We
sense, they
know that they're
agreed
a
to,
terrorist group.
I get it, but they agreed to the ceasefire, right? And, you would be hopeful that there can be some sort of scenario which is peaceful going forward. Otherwise, it all gets rather depressing.
Close. No, I said that I'm hopeful. I'm happy about that. I'm just saying that I think it's incredibly unrealistic. I think that you say the Qataris and the Saudis and everyone else want a solution to this, but then you even have to think about why do they want a solution? Why is it in their interest to do so? Does it just show the greater world that they care about other people and they care about innocent people dying? Does it help their economic growth somehow? Does it help their own security somehow by giving the Palestinians their own state because it harms Israel? So therefore, is that why they want it? There's many questions that come along with this. And I think, look, unfortunately, we're in a position where, yes, maybe these leaders are negotiating good things that are ensuring a few less people are dying, even as famine continues in Gaza and thousands of people are ill and sick and dying just from lack of food. It's good that ceasefires have been organized, but at the end of the day, these leaders are not caring about the people. I mean, Trump, in his speech, this is not something that he said behind closed doors. He said it in a speech that was broadcasted around the world. He said, well, the Israelis are really good at using their weapons. I'm happy we gave them those weapons. I'm happy we gave them those missiles. They obviously know what they're doing. And what he was referring to them committing genocide on the Palestinian people. And this is not something to argue with because the UN has called it genocide and many other countries have been calling it genocide for a really long period of time. And listeners, if you don't know exactly what genocide is, it's specifically the aim to get rid of one race or one ethnicity. So when you target that ethnicity, it can be with bullets, it can be restricting their food so they starve, it can be stopping them from being able to have children, so therefore the Palestinian race does not continue in that way. It can be all of those things, and the UN has called it genocide. So you would be disagreeing with the UN if you don't think that it's genocide. And Trump has essentially lauded the fact that they committed genocide and said they did a very good job with those weapons. So he is directly supporting genocide as well. And yes, he has negotiated this agreement, but through supporting genocide.
Yes. So, yes, so it'll be interesting to see where this all goes to, but at least the bombing has stopped, and at least there is more aid being delivered, etc., etc. And so hopefully there can be some path to a brighter future in this scenario. Otherwise, it all gets rather depressing, doesn't it? Right? And there's no future, but it'll be interesting to see what the future of Netanyahu is. I think he won't last all that long once there's potential elections, etc., in Israel, given the damage he's done to brand Israel over the last few years.
Well, definitely, this is true. I also think, look, we can move on from this in a second because, as you said, it is depressing, but unfortunately, that is the state of the world right now. And it's not something that's nice to hear about, but it is something that's happening. And it is something that you can't really ignore. I know as well that it's difficult to even have the idea of a Palestinian state because in the West Bank at this very moment, most of the Israeli settlements have acted in a way. If you guys look up maps of the West Bank and Israeli settlements, it's actually quite interesting. I'm telling you guys, go look it up. Put some research into it because they have settled in particular points that cut off the Palestinian communities from each other. So it's very intentionally building settlements around different Palestinian communities. And so what looks like the West Bank on a map, in reality, that is not Palestinian land. Most of it, I think over 60% of it is now Israeli settlement land. So what even would be a Palestinian state? If they made one, you can't necessarily do it in the West Bank. There's not enough land there. Gaza has now apparently been claimed by the Israelis.
Do you think we'll get to a point where a Tony Blair is appointed as the administrator, or you don't think that will even get?
Why do you think Tony Blair would be a good as administrator of
Simply because he's
Palestinian
got
state?
the trust of the Arab world, and his foundation. He's worked a lot on this over the last 10 or 15 years, the Middle East, and he has the trust of the US and Israel together with the Arab world, right? So
Mm.
it's rare to have someone of his diplomatic ability and intelligence and interest and with those connections across the divide. That's why I think he's an interesting choice. And I think from a personal point of view, he probably wants to make up for the Iraq invasion that he was key in happening, causing that to happen. And so probably for him, it's a way to close the circle on that and hopefully contribute something positive.
And I mean, yeah, this is kind of the state of affairs. We have gotten to the point where it's does this guy want to do this for himself or does he want to do it for the people? We've gotten to the point where someone like Tony Blair can be the potential leader of a Palestinian state just to make himself feel better about errors in his past, which I think is a ridiculous point in foreign affairs to have gotten to. But this has been in commonality with everything that the United Kingdom and the United States have done over the past more than 100 years. They have placed leaders that they trust from their own countries into a lot of states in the Middle East as puppet leaders who do not have the support of the people, but they have the support of foreign powers. And this is a continuing tradition, so I suppose they're just keeping it up. Neo-colonialism at its best.
But hopefully, done with the right intention, it can help the Palestinian Authority re-establish itself over time without Hamas involved in the whole thing. So you've got to be positive about this. I mean, when people are doing things with the wrong.
Actually, trying really hard to be positive about it. I'm just telling you what it represents.
I get what it represents, but I mean, think about he's in his mid 70s, right? He could just, retire in the Cotswolds and stuff, but doesn't, he's willing to do this, right? And put himself out there to do that. So I think that's a positive thing.
But wouldn't it also work? You were just saying that he's going to give advice and support. Can't the UK give advice and support to the Palestinian Authority without having Tony Blair in charge? Can't he go there and be sent along with a whole delegation of British foreign officials and support Mahmoud Abbas in his goal of creating a Palestinian state? It's very strange a British person would be in charge of a Middle Eastern state.
What, but that would, I mean, it would only be a temporary scenario, Freddie, till Mahmoud
Okay.
Abbas and the Palestinian Authority
Well, then he wouldn't need to be the
point where they
leader.
could
Couldn't he be just like a.
operationalize the thing. I mean, you're talking about the logistics of this change, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
I
see
am.
this as
Because
someone
it's a
like a
very
Tony
serious
Blair being
thing.
in charge for only a year or so for
Yeah.
the transitional power to assist and ensure that because it's such a fraught scenario, right?
Hmm.
So you need the world's best minds and people, you need that trust factor,
The
right?
trust factor with the UK, yeah,
With
and
the
with the US.
with the UK, and he's a well-known leader who's got credibility in the Middle East, together with the US, that's really important.
I'm going to say a little point now to everyone listening because maybe there are some people out there who wonder why I am so against the idea of the US and the UK constantly intervening in other countries' conflicts. Maybe you say, why? What's wrong with that? They know what they're doing. They have really good foreign affairs. They have good policy. The reason why this can be really dangerous is because if you continue to intervene in another country's affairs, it will get to the point where people aren't happy that you keep messing up everything that's going on in their country. They will blame you. Even if you're not at fault, they will blame you for conflicts that arise, for poverty, for famine, and it will cause mass conflict in the region. So, I'm just saying that it usually doesn't work out when you have a puppet leader there because the Middle East, I don't think that Middle Eastern states like being bossed around by the UK, and I don't think the people do either. And I think there's only so long that they'll put up with it for. So it's creating a whole other issue.
I don't disagree with your general point, but given where they've come from, the nightmare that is Hamas and the Israelis, etc., I think there would be general acceptance of an interim leader to help transition this to a more
Yeah,
stable scenario,
I
right?
just think
Because
it's
anything
important
is
to
better than what
say
they've had.
they don't necessarily like he doesn't need to be the leader. Like, why can't he be the official, like, UN representative leader?
Fine,
Do you know what I
whatever.
mean? Not the actual Palestinian Authority leader. No, this is important. Don't say whatever, like you're saying the logistics of this aren't important. It is very important.
Yeah. Well, I'm not an expert on how they do the logistics. All I know is that this is a super difficult thing to achieve. So
Yeah,
you're going to have the world's best minds on this together with the
yeah, they've
Palestinian
been
Authority,
working on this for
getting
over
to
20 years.
getting to a point where they can actually lead the country and people will vote for them and not vote for Hamas, right? I mean, because they've
Yeah.
got to be credible to people who vote for them.
Well, did you know that? Can I tell you something actually, which is quite interesting? The last election that happened in the Palestinian territories was in 2004.
Okay.
That was the last election, and that was when Hamas took power. So most of the people who voted then, most of the people who are living in Gaza now, because a high proportion of them are children, and who are my age, I was born in 2004. I couldn't vote until a year or two ago. So most of the people who voted then, most of them are dead. A lot of them can't vote anymore. And so it's not representative at all of what the Palestinian people want, the fact that some of them voted for Hamas at that period of time. And they also, it wasn't a complete destruction of the other parties. I think they won like just a majority. So it's not like 90% of people voted for Hamas. It was, around half the population. And then nowadays, those people who voted in 2004 would be like a fifth of the population because so many people have aged into the voting since then. So it's interesting to think about, don't you think?
It is. It is. And
Yeah.
once an election is held, it'll be interesting, who votes for whom.
Yeah,
After all
definitely.
this, I mean, I just simply don't understand it after all this bloodshed and all this human trauma, etc., caused by the Israelis and Hamas, why you wouldn't want it just a fresh start, right? If you're a Palestinian.
I understand, but wouldn't you also think if you're a Palestinian and you don't have crazy access to the news or what's going on, right? And all you kind of know is that the Israelis have killed half of your family members, right? Like your sister, she's dead. Your wife, she's also been killed. Your parents have also been killed, and maybe you have a couple kids left, but they're suffering from malnutrition and they're all on the edge of starvation. You think, well, Israel did this. Like,
I
I
think
don't know. I think if you're thinking of the immediate pain that's caused you, Israel hurt these people. And yes, hopefully they wouldn't vote for Hamas. But wouldn't it be understandable if they did? If the people who they thought were the only ones protecting them, regardless of the fact that they're terrorists, which no, they should never be voted for. I believe that. I'm just saying that these people feel like they're lost. And when people are lost, they turn to the only people who are protecting them.
well, that's why it's super important to have a credible authority, running the place, right? So that people have a positive alternative to vote for. Anyway, shall we move on to Ukraine?
Hmm.
the other big war that's still happening in the world. So the latest is Zelensky was in Washington asking for the long-range missiles, which Trump has declined to give him. Again, so another twist in this whole scenario. And supposedly the latest is Trump has said to Zelensky, you have to give up the Donbass, which is a red line for Ukraine because, of course, Russia's made very little progress against the Ukrainians. And if you give up the Donbass, the Russians can just speed towards the west of Ukraine because that's the critical security barrier in the Ukraine. So I don't think the Ukrainians are ever going to agree to that. So again, I think we're getting to an impasse yet again here in terms of Ukraine. Supposedly Trump's going to Hungary to meet with Putin, etc., in the next 2 weeks or so. And it feels a bit like Groundhog Day to me, right? Lots of
Mm.
talk and no action.
I mean, I'm sure it doesn't really feel like that in Ukraine still at the moment. I think that the forces are still putting in a lot of effort and there's still a lot of death and violence going on, presumably. I know that another interesting kind of facet to this whole thing is that in Finland, they have been preparing more and more for a potential invasion from Russia. And I'm sure that is the same in Poland and a lot of these Eastern European countries, because there has been knowledge that has been collected of Russian bases near the Finnish border with far more military personnel than they did a few years ago. So the stocking up of military personnel and equipment across the Finnish border says that there could be signs of a future attack. Maybe not anytime soon, but sometime in the future. So the Finnish army has been preparing. I think 20% of the Finnish population is in army reserves, which is quite a fantastic number, I would say. And there's more than 80% of the population that believes that every Finn should take up arms and defend the country if need be. So there's really this sense of protection and of fighting till the end in order to preserve their country, I guess. Again.
Yeah, Finland's very well prepared, and they're now, of course, part of NATO, and the border with Russia has been closed for the last 2 years
Mm-hmm.
since the Ukrainian conflict totally closed, and it's a no-go zone, and it's a long border with Russia and Finland. I don't think Russia's going to attack Finland because
Anytime soon.
I actually think their army and their armed forces are in kind of disarray. They've lost
No, I
millions of
agree.
people. I don't think they have the capability to do it, actually,
Mm.
which is why I'm surprised that Trump doesn't give Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine and to put more pressure on Russia. But again, it goes back to what does Russia have on Donald Trump? And he never seems to push them to the point that they might reveal what they have on him. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think because we always seem to go 2 steps forward, 1 step back with this whole negotiation with Ukraine and Russia.
Look, I agree. I don't really think that Trump wants a good outcome for Ukraine. I think he's just trying to navigate this in the way that would get him the most support from the rest of the world and make him not seem like a complete lunatic. Because I think there'd be even a few MAGA people who would question it if he suddenly pandered to Russia and gave them everything they wanted and just let them have Ukraine. Don't you think? Like, I think even a few MAGA people would be like, hang on,
Yeah.
I don't know if we like Russia that much. Like, that's a big turnaround from what America used to be.
And the Europeans would be horrified and they wouldn't agree with it either. But again, I'm not sure why haven't the Europeans got to a point where they're giving Ukraine long-range missiles now?
Well, they
That's what
also
I
don't have missiles that are the same capabilities as the United States missiles. I mean, the United States is the best of the world in that stuff for a reason because they've dedicated ridiculous amounts of funding to building up their weapons arsenal. I don't think the EU can compare. And I know that they've been putting more money into it, but at the moment they don't compare.
why haven't they bought more in the US and provided to
Well,
Ukraine?
because there's only so much that the US would be willing to give up because they have to retain their own arsenal. I think that the US is very protective of their own military capabilities. They don't want to give away too much.
Anyway, I mean, I give huge credit to Zelensky. He must have the patience of a saint, right, trying to negotiate all this. It's a total
And
nightmare. The
imagine the stress that is
country's under
constantly
siege.
on your head and knowing that if something happened to you, that feels like the end, right? If something happened to Zelensky, I don't know if the country would be able to keep pushing through this because he's really become such a symbol of hope
Yeah.
and leadership, wartime leadership, like Churchill.
Yeah, exactly. So watch this space. There'll be things coming up very soon. Then we had the King's marches in the US, protests against
Protests.
Trump administration. You were saying, Freddie, seven?
I think it was numbers of up to 9 million people, 2,800 organized marches across all of the United States, and 9 million people estimated in total. But often these media sources get those numbers a little undervalued. We think back to the March for Humanity that happened in Sydney, where they said how many? They said like 10,000 people, where you felt like it was up to 100,000 who was marching along with you. So it's interesting how the numbers are often undervalued. Yeah, it was simply a no king's protest in America saying that Trump has been acting like a king, and that's not what they voted for. They didn't vote for him to have that kind of power. They voted for him to be president, but not to be a king. So, it really says something about the political climate at the moment. And we were talking about how it's interesting it hasn't been covered that much on the news because you would think that protests of up to 9 million people would have some media coverage, but where has that been on American media, especially, and, world media as of the past few days? I don't know what you think about that.
No, it's surprising. Well, it only happened on what, Sunday US time, so maybe it'll be on news sources
Maybe.
tonight, kind of thing. Or maybe we're too much ahead of the game here.
I
Um,
don't think so.
so the other interesting news that happened is more Epstein drama because Prince Andrew has now given up his titles, Duke of York, Duke and Duchess of York, because the King and Prince William have been increasingly concerned about the damage that Prince Andrew and his association with Epstein is doing to the royal family. So that is a interesting move. Another gets to stay in Royal Lodge at Windsor because they had a long-term lease on that. Interesting, but loses all his titles and, not invited to the family Christmas, etc. But the titles, as I was saying to Freddie earlier, are in abeyance, not totally cancelled because Eugenie and Beatrice, his daughters, were favourite granddaughters of the Queen, and they will be invited to Christmas and they'll keep their titles in perpetuity. So interesting that Andrew and Fergie are out, and their daughters still get to be part of the film.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's very likely that he had a role in some kind of sex trafficking, so I understand this decision. I think if even the royal family are saying, hey, we don't want a connection with this man anymore, he must have done some pretty horrific shit. I don't know about you, but I think that they would only do this if they really feel like they have to, as a drastic measure. So they must know that he did things.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about, but just kind of horrific as well. God, we need some
And
good news.
well, the other interesting news, probably not good news for the Louvre, but there was a jewelry heist over the weekend at the Louvre where some very famous jewelry was stolen.
Yeah, definitely. It was just kind of, I don't know, it feels more like a mystery novel rather than a piece of the news that we're used to, because everything we're used to is just death and conflict and, instability. But then suddenly we have this thing pop up on our media saying that it was like a series of like a few people, they managed to climb into the Louvre. It happened in a series of minutes. They broke in with, I think, like flame torches or something
Really?
into some of the crown jewels of France, stole some necklaces, stole some tiaras, and just hop, skipped, and jumped out of there. No one caught them. Now the authorities are looking for four suspects, and I don't know how far they're getting along with this investigation because it seems ridiculous that four people could steal the crown jewels in the middle of Paris and not be stopped by any police force on their way out of Paris.
Reminds me of the Spanish movie Money Heist, right?
The TV show, yes.
The TV
It's
show.
exactly like Money Heist, which is what I was thinking as well, which is kind of hilarious. So, look, maybe it's not good for some people. Maybe there's still a nefarious element to all that, but to be honest, it made me happy hearing about something like this. It was a bit more lighthearted.
Yes, exactly. And then let's, as we do, finish with an Australian angle here. Albo is on his way to Washington for the long-awaited meeting with Donald Trump. So he's going to run the gauntlet of the White House meeting under the glaze of media. So how do you think that will go, Freddie? What is your prediction?
Look, I don't know. I think that you have more thoughts on this than I do. So you say your prediction.
It'll be interesting. We have the advantage of these rare earths. China is restricting the sale of rare earths to the US, and these are essential for the AI economy and everywhere else. Australia is one of the few places in the world with some rare earths. I think 10 or 20% of the worldwide supply. So we should use that as a real negotiating thing. Obviously, the big topics are AUKUS and continued US support for that,
Mhm.
tariffs on steel, etc., and potential tariffs on pharmaceuticals. So it'll be interesting what Albo comes away with. I
Yeah.
think he'll be hoping to come out unscathed, that we're still friends, AUKUS is on track, and they're going to buy some of our rare earths. I think if he comes away like that, he'll probably be quite happy,
I
as
mean, I
opposed
think he's probably happy already that he just has a meeting because that seems like it wasn't an option for a while there. He was just like some lackey desperately calling up Trump trying to get a meeting with him, and Trump wasn't even giving him the time of day. So he's probably saying, "Thank God, he's given me some respect. This is good. And come away with this. At least having a conversation."
But as you know, these meetings can be super dangerous. So I think it will go well,
I
though.
don't think he's out to get Albanese though. I don't think he knows enough about what Albo is and what party he even supports in the US and in Australia. I think that he's off his radar. But so yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But thank you everyone for tuning in with us again. We've missed you. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more updates on everything that's happening. Obviously, like and subscribe as you do. I'm sure you already do this on both our Spotify and our YouTube. Have a look at our Instagram account if you have time. And it's been great to have you.
Thanks, Freddie. Lovely, lovely chatting with you.
Lovely to chat with you as well. Bye.